We grieve not because we lose people. We grieve because we lose the worlds. And what exactly happening when somebody dies? Do we lose a person? Or do we lose the world that this person used to generate? What exactly is life? It's something that we ride the way we go. Because we, in some sense, been created out of two ideas. The idea of our past that hidden inside of our memories, and the idea of our future that hidden inside of our goals. Otherwise you cannot live. The whole idea of life is you building yourself through the memories. And the way you build yourself by creating a goal in front of you, and you go toward this goal. You write your own story. You create this continuity across your life. And the center of this continuity is yourself. And you keep writing your story. And then on a certain point, you die because everything biological dies. And you are a part of this biology. And you are a part of this mortality. And when you die, the self collapses. And with no self, there's no continuity. Also, there's no memories. And also, there's no world that you keep creating when you were alive. It's like a movie set. If you go on a movie set, all the stuff are there. But there's no more movie. There's no more story on this movie set. There's no more continuity. And all these things useless. They don't belong to no one and to nowhere. And there's no life inside of all those things. I remember when my father died, I was looking at his things and they felt empty. They felt out of place, like they were useless, because the person who used to own those things weren't there anymore. His world collapsed. His self stopped existing. And you look at the things that used to belong to him, and you don't know what to do with them because they have no sense and they're useless. And the idea of death can be terrifying, because what if the idea of death is unrestrained madness? Because when we're alive, we kind of try to subjugate this internal madness within us in one form that give us our biology. Because if you start obsessing with your own feelings, with your own thoughts, they go out of control. And once your feelings out of control, once you concentrate on all your feelings at the same time, they tear you apart. And they don't give you a chance to make a step. That's why you have to be very careful in expressing your own feelings, because you can lose your way inside of those feelings, and it's one of the way toward madness. Because madness, in some sense, when you're unable to discriminate in your own thoughts and in your own feelings, when you lose hierarchy in some sense, because you cannot write a book if you want to write everything and at the same time, because every book starts with the first sentence and with the first chapter, and it's slowly growing toward the highest point and then go toward the end. The same with our life. You have to take one step at a time. If you think you want to make many steps in every directions, what it does to you, you don't make no steps at all, and you paralyze in one place. That's why you have to control your feelings, control your emotions, and control your thoughts, because you need structure, and this structure helps you not to go crazy. The structure helps you not to go mad. That's why, in some sense, this life contained inside of the frame of your biological frame helps you to create hierarchy on what matters the most. And once you know this hierarchy, you can establish goal toward which you can follow through the life. Because it's all about the ability to know what matters, to know your own hierarchy. because we have infinite possibilities in front of us. We have infinite choices and infinite steps and infinite directions. But we are able to only select one direction at a time, one possibility at the time. And what if when you die, this idea collapses because there's no more self that would control this idea of hierarchy? When you collapse, the hierarchy collapses, and you are everywhere and at the same time. It might be this way. Maybe death is just some sort of liberation toward chaos, from the order to chaos. That's why your body decomposing, and that's why you're everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And I was thinking about our dreams. When you go to sleep, you kind of have conscious because you remember your dreams, but you're not in control of your dreams. And what happens is there's no continuity in your dreams. You can jump from scene to scene, from idea to other idea. And funny thing, when you remember your dreams, they make often no sense, but when you dream, it kind of does. When you dream, and your dream's incredibly vivid and incredibly almost close to insanity, and you're not surprised. It seems like normal for you to dream this way. Only when you wake up, only then you start judging your dreams from your sane perspective, from your conscious perspective. But when you dream, you kind of partially conscious, and therefore your dream partially makes sense, and also your dream partially a story that you have to make some sense out of it. And it's really hard sometimes because you can think so many things, like what does it mean? And you kind of have to understand your dreams through allegory, through something that doesn't have definite answer, and you have to look for this answer yourself. It's kind of like an incredibly complicated puzzle that you try to assemble, and then to look at the picture of this assembled puzzle and find some meaning inside of this dream. And it's kind of like maybe death is the extreme of our dreaming. Maybe in death, you, in some sense, sinking in the ocean of many dreams, many scenes, many stories that make no sense and do make sense at the same time. Kind of like plus and minus, 0 and 1, all words and at the same time. And there's no way for you to create hierarchy, since hierarchy requires life and death itself doesn't require hierarchy at all. It's an interesting idea, a little bit maddening, but it's an interesting idea to explore, because I like to play with this idea, with the idea of self. And I'm really curious about death, because, I mean, you can logically assume that death, it's when you don't exist at all. You don't perceive darkness because you have no perception, you have no self, and you just don't exist. It's like when you cannot imagine time before your birth. The same, you cannot imagine time after your death, because there's no time, because time requires existence, time requires life, and you have no life and no existence, and therefore you have no time, and therefore you have no perception, and with no perception you have nothing. And even nothingness in self cannot be perceived. It means you just don't exist at all. That's kind of like ultimate idea of death. But when you play with this idea, maybe it's kind of like a dream. But at the same time, if you had a surgery and they put you to sleep, you don't remember your dream. You're so deep in the sleep that you just close your eyes, then open your eyes, and 2-3 hours are over. Maybe that's what death is. Maybe you just skip such an amount of time to be able to be born again in some other body. I don't know. That's the idea of reincarnation. Death is a fascinating object to speculate, because we still don't know what it is, and we still don't understand what does it mean to exist, and what does it mean to not exist. Because we know what does it mean to exist. In other words, existing is the place of hierarchy. You have memories, you have continuity toward your goal. For example, your memories define in some sense your goal, because through your memories you understand yourself, and by understanding yourself you understand what do you need, what do you want, and on this information you build the way toward your goal. And then eventually, hopefully, you will accomplish your goal, and then it's going to be the end of your story, and then you die. But another thing, for example, what if you're the one who generate the world, and the world collapse within your death? And it makes sense too, because it might be that we all are generators of realities, and these realities coexist with each other. We live in society where the realities of others coexist parallel with us. And what happens is when somebody, for example, dear to you, like your wife or your husband or somebody dies next to you, you can feel not only their death, but their reality collapses as well. Because I remember this story about Rwanda genocide. There was a woman who was saying the story that all her families, all her village died. They were all murdered. She only was the one who survived, and she has no friends, she had no family, she had no things, no pictures, nothing. It's like all her life was erased in some sense. When she moved to another country, she was telling the story like she had nothing. There's not a single person with whom she could share the memory, because everybody were dead. And I'm curious, that in some sense she was almost dead by herself, because there's not a single person with whom she could have shared her memories. And that's the scariest part. Maybe that's what happening, because maybe reality itself doesn't exist without conscious observer. Maybe we need other people to be able to observe ourselves, to be able to mirror ourselves, because maybe life itself is impossible without a group of conscious observers who observe themselves and generate reality to support other people's reality. Maybe just we kind of like a group generating machine where we create some simulation that we constantly add certain pieces. Like we cannot exist by ourselves only. We need somebody else with us to be able to coexist. That's why we are social animals. And maybe that's the idea, that we need to share memories with somebody, because otherwise your memories don't exist on their own. And I think you can defeat, in some sense, death in several ways, like standard way to leave your kids. And in some sense, your kids will continue your story. And if you were a good parent for them, and if you raise them right, they will continue your story through their own story. And in some sense, you will still be alive when you're gone. Or you can create some body of work where people will understand your story through your work and adapt your story to themselves and continue living your story. Like, for example, when you read books or listen to music of great writers or composers, you in some sense try to continue their story, because their story is so appealing and you kind of in love with their stories, and you want to adapt their stories, you want to learn from those stories, and you want to continue those stories, and you kind of merge your own story with their stories. And in some senses create continuity, and continuity in some sense one of the steps to become immortal, to defeat death, because death is just the completion of your story. And to be able to continue your story, you just have to find the way to create your life story so compelling, so incredibly good that people would like to participate in continuation of your story. Even when you're gone, they will kind of grab your book and continue writing this book, and then you write in this book. And then when you look, for example, on great thinkers like Plato or Socrates, they lived about 2,500 years ago, incredibly long ago, but people still continue writing their story because they try to understand their ideas. And in some sense, these people are still alive through this incredible continuation, through thousands of years of continuation, because their story will live forever. And I think when I ask this question, we grieve not because we lose people, we grieve because we lose the world. I think we grieve about both, because a person is the beginning of the story, and all of us want to continue to, all of us want that somebody else will continue our story when we are unable to continue by ourselves because we're dead. Because that's, I think, our hope that our life makes much more sense, not only for us but for other people as well. That's why we try to leave some legacy, good legacy, for other people to see, to understand, and then to continue writing our stories. And our stories hopefully will continue when we're gone.